Hey everybody, here today to talk a little bit about Absolute Batman number 6, the final issue of the first arc. I'm lucky enough to have the artist Nick Dragotta and Scott Snyder on the show to talk about it. Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, always great to talk Batman with you two. We got to start off with talking about the reception. I'm going to throw it over to you first, Nick. I mean, Absolute Batman, the whole all-in line, the Absolute line of DC has been a runaway train, just a huge hit. From your perspective, what's it been like to have so many readers reacting to this new version of Batman, Nick?
I mean, it's been awesome. It's exceeded every expectation. I mean, I can't even DC doesn't like us to talk numbers, but I mean, I'm blown away by how well the book is done. Issue 1 just went into its sixth printing. Um, Judging by the reaction to 6 today, I'm sure 6 is going to go into multiple printings. It's just been insane. I mean, it's just been absolutely great for comics. I mean, I love the fact that we're talking about comic books so much. I'm being interviewed about comics. I'm being flown all over the world to talk about Absolute Batman. I mean, it's been rad. Just like Scott keeps kind of referencing, like, with this feels creator owned. I think it's just like real creator driven. DC giving us that freedom to have this say with this character. It's been unreal. It's been unreal, and like a lot of responsibility too. Like I want to really continue to deliver and just turn in an entertaining book. I mean, we all got in the comics because it's a medium that can really do what nothing else can. We can do it quickly. It's only limited to our imaginations, and it's just such a special medium. So, I'm just really proud of the fact too. Like me and Scott really wanted to center in on the craft of making a comic book. And what I mean by that is like really merging words and pictures, hitting emotional beats, and building that to carry those you forward to then having a bigger beat and a more emotional punch. And I think we're like building up towards that. And, we're doing the best we can. I don't want to say we always deliver, but we're trying to push it forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, issue 6 is amazing. We'll talk a little bit in specifics in a second, but I know you had some reservations, Scott. We have talked about, you weren't sure if you were the right person, and it was such a, personal risk for you to go back to Batman. So to see the success, it has to be very gratifying for you as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been unbelievable. Like, I really wasn't sure at all that it would work. And I know that the success like seems otherwise, but like coming into it, I mean, I was nervous about like getting whether or not anyone would respond to this take. But then once we started going, like Nick, said, it feels like a creator-owned book where it's almost less sort of driven by its relationship to what's happening in the main universe or any of that kind of stuff than it is about this kind of brand new direction. And it just got more and more exciting, and I felt more and more confident. And before it even came out, I was at the point where it was like, I love this book. I love working with Nick on it. However it does, we'll be excited. And the fact that it has done as well as it has really means a lot. So I'm very, very proud, that, and very grateful to fans and retailers for showing such support.
Yeah, it's really interesting, specifically for 6 to end the first arc, having Black Mask as the villain and him sort of representing this place we're at, societally. And you have and I have talked about the fact that you're a little more of Alfred's perspective, and Batman's a little more of his perspective of a younger generation. Can you talk a little bit about choosing to have Black Mask as the initial villain to kind of represent where we are with things so kind of up in the air and not necessarily bleak, but there's not as it feels like there's not as much hopefulness, in the world, and we really need to kind of address that.
Yeah, I mean, this universe, I had a big talk with the other absolute creators, with Jason and Kelly in particular, and we wanted to talk about like what does it mean for the heroes not only to go up against these really systemic threats, but to not win, like in a way where they beat one villain and then everything goes back to the way it was, or it's better than it was before in a really tangible way. And ultimately, like what we realized was that the whole idea of this universe is to show people that it's worth fighting, even more worth fighting sometimes when you don't, you're not going to get to see the results that you want. You might see them, they might happen after you're dead, but they like your actions hopefully have some small effect going forward, and that it's always worth it to fight for what you think is right, even if, you're not going to see the outcome that you want right now. And so Black Mask represents the opposite view of that. That's why he felt like our version of him felt like the perfect sort of first villain, because his whole philosophy is sort of like, it's over, we're past the midnight on the doomsday clock. The only thing left to do is like beg for the scraps that fall from the table and have a big party and enjoy yourself because we're all dead. Because rich people and powerful people have carved up the world the way they want it, and there's no stopping it, and it's all entropy at this point. And his visual sort of his whole kind of, to Nick's credit, like his whole visual iconography like speaks to that, the death masks, the nihilism, the kind of like, absolute partying all the time, like that he's surrounded by this kind of makeshift party family and all this lavish stuff, and that's who he is. So it felt like the right first villain, the villain that says that you're never going to make a difference, so why don't you just enjoy what you have or try and get more and just accept it, because this is a joke, like what, you thinking you can affect anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. There are a couple moments in issue 6 that are incredible, and one of them is on the screen behind me, kind of almost a callback to that cover of Return of the Dark Knight. So let me ask you, Nick, with Batman jumping out of that plane, the lightning crashing behind him, uh, you came up with that. Scott had it in the script. Like, talk a little bit about, because that's such an iconic image. I can see that lasting forever, much like that cover of Dark Knight Returns #1.
Well, I mean, a splash page is always a day to catch up, right? It's a quick way to get through a page. And it just seemed like a no-brainer. I mean, I knew he was jumping out of a plane, and yeah, and I think this book is a lot, in a lot of ways, like a love letter to Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli, um, and just the way that they told stories and what they did with Batman. I mean, it's a huge, the Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, huge inspiration in my work, and especially when I'm drawing Batman. So that's it, really. I mean, and just it just looks so damn cool, and I
That's
think
his.
we really are in an era too where nostalgia seemed, we were riding kind of a nostalgia wave. We have been for some time, or maybe it's always been there. But I think whenever, I discovered Dark Knight Returns in '86, I'm 50 years old. So I think it is nice to always just kind of play homage to some of that stuff and then be self-referential within comics. It's just fun. So.
The other moment that I love, I've gone back time and time again and looked at it. There's a kind of a younger member of the Black Mask of the party animals, and Batman wraps a life preserver around him and literally drop kicks him. So I gotta ask, was that you, Nick, that came up with that? Was that Scott? Talk a little bit about that
I
scene.
mean, my recollection of that, Scott's always pushing me like, all right, Nick, let's go. We got to go bigger on this fight. And then I think both were on the fence. I'm like, well, I think I don't, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were just like, well, I think I said like, he'll punt the kid. I mean, he'll just punt the kid.
It was your idea, and I was like, "That's brilliant. Do it."
And we just started cracking up. I mean, like there's so many times when we're talking and one of us will have an idea, and when we just start laughing, we both know, yeah, that's good. And I'm always telling Scott, I'm like, are you writing this down? Because I will forget. Since yeah, Scott's got this incredible memory, or he's always typing away. And then it's interesting. A lot of people are like, this issue is so brutal, but to me, it's probably one of the least brutal issues because, again, comics are a deadline driven industry, and I think the directive was have a big crazy fight with this Black Mask inner gang. And I just was kind of like, you know what? No, the Emperor has no clothes with this group. Like, this Batman's possessed. They're going to jump ship. And Batman, being the hero, throws him a life vest. But, if you stand in his way, he's going to wreck you. But yeah, and then I won't talk about how the Black Mask meets his end. I want readers to
Oh
read
yeah.
that. That was all Scott. I mean, that was an ending where Scott and I worked this like hybrid Marvel style. I got a beat sheet. I got like the ideas on the page, which we've discussed previously. And then when you start to find the real estate, things can get cramped. And to Scott's credit, he was like, Nick, we need to this moment. It needs its own moment, like it needs its own splash for the Black Mask end scene. So, I mean, Scott made a great call there, and yeah, we went big on it. And Scott's whole idea, I don't want to ruin it, but yeah, you'll know when you read it. It's
Oh
fun.
yeah, I mean, even when we did our weekly DC spotlight, we typically we go spoilers. We didn't. We're like, no, you guys need to pick this up and check it out for yourself because when you see that final confrontation, it's amazing. But one of the things that strikes me every time I talk to the two of you about this, and it speaks to what you were saying, Nick, about the collaborative nature of comics. It's not Nick is not just drawing, what you're putting down on the script, right, Scott? It's more of a collaboration in terms of building the story. So that coming back to Batman, but coming back to Batman with Nick. Again, going back to this idea of being rewarding and knowing that you made the right choice because you guys are just having so much fun building this story.
Yeah, no, I mean, like again, it all came from no desire to come back to Gotham. It was a pitch that I really loved that I felt like somebody else could do. What if Batman was the disruption in the system and his villains were the system itself? But then when it really became clear, like I've said to you before, like through James Tynan, that like, I was talking about it so much that I should just try it. And we hadn't been able to find anybody to do it. The first thing I did was, call Nick and be like, we didn't know each other very well at all, but it was, his art was the sort of the visual language of it in my head. And when he said that he would do it, it was just kind of like, this is the series. You know what I mean? This is the series because it just he just came to life, and it felt like every element we decide together, Nick and I, like it's really instinctual, it's really collaborative. Like we wind up working together in a way that's different than anything that I've experienced before, where we talk all the time. We sort of also allow ourselves the room to change things. And we trust each other a lot. I always had that with Greg. Greg and I trust each other fully. I loved working with him. I'd love to do it again. But I feel like in the time I was on Batman, I never got to the level of letting go that Greg wanted me to, and I feel very bad about that. Like he teases me about it, like we just all the time. Like then I was always like I couldn't, we never had a moment to breathe because it was every month from the moment we started and it never stopped. So it was always just that. So for me, it's kind of like here the idea that I'm just in a different place in my life. And because this is an alternate version of Batman and doesn't have the pressure of existing in that main continuity with all of that legacy, I can just let go and allow us to kind of, chart the direction a little bit more impulsively as we go based on, we have an outline that goes all the way for a couple of years. So there's structure, but allowing us to kind of feel it out and just be organic and it's been just a real thrill. And I think that's the magic of the series is that it's the two of us just working that way together and not sticking to anything really minute. It's more like what feels right. Like if you want to punt a kid, let's punt the kid.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Such a great scene, everybody. Definitely got to pick it up. The other thing that's interesting, Batman being, not part of the system, but trying to tear down a system that maybe is a little, oppressive or kind of represents where we are in society. Growing up without that silver spoon, but also growing up with some of the villains. I mean, Batman has the best rogues gallery in comics, let's face it. But, Black Mask villain. Mr. Freeze, who's coming up, villain. Bane, villain. Joker, who we get to see briefly in this issue, villain. But then we've got, Killer Croc. We've got Catwoman. We've got Penguin that are friends growing up. So how did you guys decide, who's so iconic we need to keep him as a villain? Who, as it turns out, are going to be kind of these kids that he grew up with without the privilege, if you will?
Well, for us, it just felt like who were the people that would make sense that he would learn from and who would be who are the ones that are sympathetic villains um, in the mythos with him, like to me, like Harvey is obvious. Harvey always kind of has a relationship with Bruce as
Hmm.
adults before he becomes Two-Face. Killer Croc similarly has gone back and forth about being someone that's kind of a quasi ally, villain, monster, all of that. I thought a lot about Pam. whether to put her in there, but it really just felt like the ones that would grow up in Crime Alley that would be the ones that taught Bruce something about Batman, and this core group felt right. Like he would learn the underworld. Oswald was always there. It was like Ozzy would be the fun tour of the underworld in Gotham. Harvey would be its politics, learning that. Wayland was always going to be training to fight. Wayland is a former UFC champion. And Eddie is the one because he's so smart and so self-made that would teach him like this kind of higher level thinking, algorithmic thinking. You know what I mean? Um, so that's who he trains with. That they're all a part of Batman in that way. So that's how we really and Selina. I wanted a deeper relationship once I pitched it to Nick. Like this gives us a chance to do something I haven't seen in comics. I mean, the closest thing I've seen to it I realized after we did it was that in the Gotham TV show, the two of them meet when they're kids. But the idea of them knowing each other from childhood and being each other's kind of first love felt like something that gave it a whole new dimension to me that would give them a different level of depth between them. And it just felt right. So that was how we decided on that core group. But it was tempting. It was like, who do we bring? Do we bring in, Victor Freeze, we bring in Crane, and then it was like, no, this is the core group, and then everybody outside of that exists in a world where we can use them, reinvent them as villains.
This version of Batman, Nick, is so emotional. Partly because it's only his father that passed away, in that initial event at the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
His mom's still there. But talking about this core group of friends, as Scott is, as great as your action is, we get some real emotional moments when we see a younger Bruce, as a kid with his friends, or we see in this particular issue him discussing the events at the zoo with his mom. And yeah, you handle the action so well, but those emotional beats, your art, it really pays homage and pulls us in as readers. So how do it's kind of easy. I've heard other artists say to block out action, on the page. It's much harder to pull us in as readers when it's emotional. So, is it easier for you to do those emotional beats?
No, I hate drawing kids. Whatever Scott's like, flashback to the kids.
That's
I'm
why
like,
we punt them.
um, it just, I'm a big proponent of less is more, the Alex Toth, School of Comics. To add to truth just detracts from it. So, I like to keep the kids kind of cartoony, simple, and even Martha, I try and draw like a little simple and like I'm almost trying to design them as icons. Martha always has her hair up. So whether she's in silhouette, it's Martha. Bruce has the big coif in the front, like it's him. And just have the readers inject themselves, like you can look at Peanuts, The Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes, the simplicity, drawing on simplicity and then using that as a tool. And then Scott is going to just write poetry on these scenes, getting out of the way of the words, but then punctuating it with just the right shot. And then you draw upon your experience as a parent. I have two kids. Scott has three boys. I have two boys. I've experienced that. Now, I haven't lost my partner or anything in a shooting, but I know what it's like for a kid to, be upset, come snuggle up to you, things like that. So, yeah, it's challenging, and drawing action is way easier because you can just be more loose. But like I try and be just as expressive, but to over reference that, I think you detract from it. To give it like such a specific, this is this kid, this is what he looks like, I'm rendering it super tight. I feel that's when you kind of could get into specifics that then would detract from the reader and might go, this looks off, this doesn't look right. So I try and draw that as simply as possible and kind of get out of the way of the words. But like you said, punctuate it with a shot when Bruce snuggles up to her and lies on her lap and just like let you rest on that moment and take that away from it. Again, this like all goes back to what, I mean, I sound like a broken record, but Scott and I really like from the initial phone call when he called me to do this job, we both were like, dude, let's get back to just like, if you've noticed in the book, there's no overlapping panels. There's no like full bleed type, we're getting back to clarity and containing everything within the panel so your eyes can rest within that panel, and then really trying to hit beats. So making sure the words are working in conjunction with the picture, and not working against one another. And I think that's like been one of the real joys of this book when it's all, that first initial lettering. Um, Shout out to Clayton Cowles, the letterer, and just going back in with Scott and just being like, what if we move this here? And Scott's like, oh, I want to rewrite this. I want to make this less, or I want to expand here, and just crafting a comic the way they should be crafted. So, I mean, it's nice to hear, Jace, because it tells me we're doing our job, when people are commenting on like, oh, this is really hitting home and the emotional beats, because we're really setting out to try and do that. And I don't think we hit it out of the park every time. We fail a lot too, but I'll leave, I'll leave those self-criticisms probably to you can edit that out.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's working just based on the numbers and the reprints, and it's great because this is a new version of the character, and being able to have Martha there, provides opportunity for story, and as relatable as it is with Pennyworth is sort of our generation viewpoint,
Yeah.
and kind of a younger Batman. So Absolute Batman 6 is out right now. Everybody go out there and pick it up. And be sure you're telling your retailer, hey, I'm going to be picking this up on a monthly basis. We have Mr. Freeze coming up, the absolute version of Mr. Freeze coming up soon. So pre-order,
Marcos
pre-order,
Martin,
pre-order.
2 issues, incredible storyteller, comic book artist. I think fans are going to love it. Just a little teaser. If you want more of what's going on between Bruce and his friends, these are the 2 issues to pick up. I love what Scott and Marcus did in issues 7 and 8. It is awesome. So.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the time, gentlemen. Loving the series, and congratulations on the success, and I look forward to more.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jace. It's great seeing you as always. Really appreciate all the support.